In the criminal trial over the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, all three defendants today have been found guilty. Now, this case got a lot of attention when all of it first went down. But over the past couple of weeks, the Kyle Rittenhouse trial was underway, and that was more overtly political and dominated the news. Meanwhile, this trial was going on. Many of us were passively keeping an eye on it, but it wasn't overtly political. Well, now we have a verdict. All three men found guilty, and of course, it has now become political. You see, a lot of people on the left had been saying the whole time that Kyle Rittenhouse being found not guilty was proof the system is broken. But now we have activists outside the court cheering. In fact, when the judge read the first count against one of the men accused of murder, a man in the courtroom elated, cheered. And the judge said, "Get that man out of my courtroom, please, no outbursts." These activists are now celebrating. So is the justice system broken or is it balanced? In this case, I'll give you my straight opinion. I think we all watched what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse. We had a very overtly political story and a lot of interest for us that are politically motivated to figure out what was going on. This was a Black Lives Matter riot that had been going on for several days. Kyle Rittenhouse went out and was rendering aid to everybody. And then he ended up firing in self-defense on more than three people, shooting three people. But most of us knew this was self-defense. In the case of Ahmaud Arbery, this is a story about a young black man who had been entering a home under construction on more than one occasion. And many people accused him of, or believed that he was casing the joint or trying to steal something. In both stories, we have a group of people believing that they're chasing down justice and attacking someone. Unfortunately for Ahmaud Arbery, he wasn't armed, though he did attack the man in question. And I believe at one point even grabbed their weapon before getting shot and then dying. It's tragic and horrifying, but these stories are still vastly different. And I think even with the conviction here that many people on the right and left are saying was the right call, we're seeing the seriousness of the political imbalance. Let me explain. And then we'll go through the news and I'll give you some updates on what's happening with Rittenhouse and other presses addressing this. But let me just start off this video by saying, in the instance of Kyle Rittenhouse, he was attacked by a man, Joseph Rosenbaum. He fired on Rosenbaum in self-defense after trying to flee and yelling friendly several times. He was able to protect himself. Rosenbaum ended up dying. And then a mob attacked Kyle Rittenhouse. As Kyle Rittenhouse fled and then was attacked, hit with the skateboard, knocked to the ground, someone jumped and kicked him in the head. And then he was attacked by two individuals, one with a skateboard, one with a Glock. He fired in self-defense and he survived. And he was put on trial for it. When we look at this video, outright, we can see that Kyle Rittenhouse was the victim. He was being attacked by assailants, and he had to go on trial for it. Now, the difference with the Arbery case is that Ahmaud Arbery did not survive. It's a serious tragedy. But once again, it was a group of men who thought they were chasing down justice, who were ignorant, being mindless, didn't know what they were doing, and they ended up on trial. It's interesting to me. I'm not going to pretend that it means the world, but it is interesting that because Kyle Rittenhouse survived, they put him on trial and not the mob that attacked him, thinking they were seeking some kind of justice. And in Georgia, admittedly different areas, different cities, different politicians and all that I get, the men who thought they were seeking out justice got put on trial and convicted. So if I were to say that the conservatives are correct, this was the right verdict, I would go on to say, and I think most people on the right would agree, the people who attacked Kyle Rittenhouse, namely the individuals who survived Jump Kick Man and Gage Grosskreutz, should be charged in much the same way the individuals, the McMichaels, were. Now, I'm not absolutely convinced the verdict was correct. I don't know for sure. It appears the verdict is based on the judge's instructions on citizens arrest law. I will say very simply, I don't believe for a minute that Ahmaud Arbery was just jogging. I think that's overtly naive, and I believe it's propaganda. However, that being said, the man did not deserve to be confronted by a bunch of guys in cars with weapons, and it's a complicated case. Truth be told, I covered it in detail when it happened. I believe it was, almost 2 years ago. I have we'll pull up the story in a second and go through the details. I don't think people should be taking the law into their own hands and chasing people down. I'm also not entirely convinced that murder charges make a whole lot of sense. But we'll get into it. Far be it from me to be the arbiter of morality, and this one's particularly tough. And I will say from the get-go, when I covered this a while ago and I had much stronger opinions on what went down, my opinions today may be very different for two reasons. I haven't covered the story in a long time. A lot of the key details I probably won't remember, and my opinion is going to be based on a rather limited understanding of what went down. Take that into consideration. Go back and watch my other videos, and maybe, you'll get a different view of what went down. I think it may be that murder convictions across the board, even for the guy who was following, are overtly political. Now, I'm not saying these guys should just be allowed to walk. Absolutely not. They confronted a guy because they thought he was trespassing or stealing something with shotguns in a car and tried to detain him. You try to make a citizen's arrest, you're responsible for what happens. But let's be real. If a cop was there, cop probably would have chased him down in much the same way. And if Arbery, fought with the cop, probably the same thing would have happened. And that cop probably would have been found not guilty on all counts. I'm not saying that would be the right call. I'm just saying you wear a badge, you are allowed to do what these guys did. I think everybody agrees. And I'm not trying to make, a statement. I'm literally, if you're wearing a badge, you can confront this guy and you will likely get away with, you'll likely not be found guilty of any crimes if the individual dies. Let's read the story, though, and we'll go through this. I want to show you the analysis from Andrew Branca as he was covering the tail end of this case. And admittedly, we were all covering the Rittenhouse case because of the political implications. I still think this story is important to cover. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member, and you'll get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and you will also be supporting our journalists. We're covering a lot of stories a lot of people don't want to cover. We got exclusives about Anthony Fauci, NIAID funding the monkey torture island. We have a story about the sovereign tribal members in Australia asking for international assistance over the COVID lockdowns. These are a lot of stories you're probably not going to see in the mainstream media. And we are very careful to try and fact check this stuff and be honest with you. That being said, smash the like button, share this video right now, let people know what's going on. And let me give you the basic news right now and then talk about the political implications here. From the Daily Mail. White father and son are both found guilty of murder of Ahmaud Arbery after Georgia jury rejected their claim they killed unarmed black jogger in self-defense. Third defendant is also found guilty. I'm going to pause right now. I'm going to be overtly opinionated on this stuff, and I will absolutely stress the Kyle Rittenhouse case took precedent because this was about the Black Lives Matter riots, Jacob Blake, and a much bigger story. The Ahmaud Arbery case is very important, but I still remember quite a bit about this case, and let me just say, the idea that Ahmaud Arbery was just jogging is propaganda, okay? He didn't live anywhere near this neighborhood. He had no reason to be jogging in this other neighborhood. He had repeatedly entered a home that was under construction. I believe the owner, there was camera footage of it. And I believe the owner was like, hey, we don't want this guy doing this. He's trespassing. However, I can say overtly and definitively, trespassing does not warrant death. That should be obvious to everybody. But let's read. Now, what I think is really interesting is they also go on and say the third defendant is also found guilty. This was a guy who was just following in his car. That's why I think this is political. If it wasn't for the third guy who was filming as they were chasing down Arbery, none of these men would have been charged or convicted. In fact, this guy thought that this footage would exonerate them, and it got them convicted. Here's a story from the Daily Mail. They say, all three defendants in the Ahmaud Arbery trial were found guilty of murdering the black jogger in February 2020. The word jogger here is loaded and should not be included, in my opinion. That is analysis, not fact. There's no fact stating what this guy was doing. We can simply say there was a guy in this neighborhood entering a building he shouldn't have. He was chased down and he was killed. He did confront these guys. And there was an argument about this. When they confront him, he's running away. They try to stop him. He goes around the vehicle and then attacks the guy. He could have just kept running. It was after he is attacked and his weapon is grabbed, one of the McMichaels fires, killing him. So let's get into this. They say gunman Travis McMichael was found guilty on the charge of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit a felony. His father, Gregory McMichael, was found guilty of felony murder, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit a felony. He was found not guilty of malice murder. Neighbor William Roddy Bryan was found guilty of felony murder, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit a felony. He was found not guilty of malice murder and one count each of felony murder and aggravated assault. After being sworn in more than 2 weeks ago, the disproportionately white jury heard from more than 24 witnesses, including gunman Travis McMichael, the only defendant to take the witness stand, and was presented with evidence, photos, police body camera footage, autopsy reports, and more. McMichael, 35, his father, Gregory, 65, and neighbor William Roddy Bryan Jr. all pleaded not guilty to charges including murder, aggravated assault, and false imprisonment for the killing in the coastal suburb of Satilla Shores on February 23rd, 2020. So this was almost 2 years ago. McMichaels told police they suspected Arbery was a fleeing burglar when they armed themselves and jumped in a pickup truck to chase him. Now, I want to show you this here from Andrew Branca. He's going to be on Timcast IRL tonight. We're going to be talking about this, and this will be fascinating. It's going to be a really important conversation. There's a lot of stuff here that, look, it's been almost 2 years that, again, I will admit to say there are details that I don't remember. But I think it's important to say all of these conservatives are jumping on the bandwagon saying, see, the right verdict was reached here. I don't think any of these people know anything about what happened in this case. And I'll tell you this. I don't know if this was the right verdict, but I would lean towards, I believe it was overly egregious. I don't like that Ahmaud Arbery lost his life. I am disgusted by the fact that he lost his life. I believe that if a group of guys in trucks surround me and a guy's got a shotgun and they're like, stop, I'm going to be like, no. And then you got to make a decision, fight or flight. Just because they believed this guy was committing a crime doesn't mean they have a right to do what they did. But at the same time, like with Anthony Huber, he didn't know what Kyle Rittenhouse was doing. He thought Kyle Rittenhouse was a bad guy, and he attacked him, and Kyle Rittenhouse defended himself. Interesting. This idea that these guys, look, they're not the same cases. They're similar in some respects. The McMichaels and this dude were vigilantes. They believed they had a right to stop this guy. And when Kyle Rittenhouse didn't attack the mob. He ran from them. Ahmaud Arbery initiated the fight. So therein lies the deep question. Was Travis McMichael allowed to defend himself when Arbery placed his hands on his weapon? Let me give you some of the details here real quick. It's from the Wikipedia entry that I do not believe will be entirely fair and accurate. So we'll need to have a bigger look. I'm going to say outright, I don't know. The jury reached its verdict. I was not as well versed on this story. I didn't interview 7 witnesses in the Ahmaud Arbery case. We did with Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse was big and it was political. On February 23rd, 2020, Ahmaud Marquez Arbery, they say an unarmed 25-year-old black man, was fatally shot in Satilla Shores. I don't know why they have to include unarmed. It's always about propaganda. They say Arbery had been pursued by 3 white residents. Again, I don't know why we have to make this all about race, because we didn't do that with Waukesha, did we? Travis McMichael and his father, Gregory, who were armed, and in one vehicle, William Roddy Bryan, who was in another, pursued. After Travis exited his vehicle and wielded a shotgun, Travis and Arbery engage in a physical confrontation. They omit the fact that it's actually Arbery who initiated the confrontation, during which Travis shot Arbery. Police interview transcripts detailed that Gregory initiated the chase after seeing Arbery running past his house. That I believe to be true, suspecting that Arbery had committed burglary or theft in Satilla Shores. But no evidence has emerged of Arbery doing so, and I believe that's correct. Some people say that he did steal. I don't believe, as of right now, that there's evidence of that. Again, you can go watch my other videos where I cover this in greater detail. But I believe this guy was just leaving. He was running. According to police testimony, Bryan told police that he saw the chase and joined in independently, but was not sure if Arbery had done anything wrong. Arbery had entered an under-construction house with no doors 5 times in 5 months, including once shortly before the shooting. But security videos showed that he had not touched or taken anything. In fact, in one of the videos from, I believe it was just the night before, he walks in, looks around, walks out. Now, apparently the guy who owned the property took issue with this, word had gotten around, and then they decided to pursue. The Glynn County Police Department said the Brunswick District Attorneys advised them on February 23rd to make no arrests, while the Brunswick DA's office denied that its top office holders gave such advice. Waycross District Attorney George Barnhill twice advised the GCPD to make no arrests, once on February 24th, before he was assigned to the case, on February 27th, and a second time on April 2nd, while announcing his intention to recuse himself from the case due to his connections between his son and Gregory McMichael. My understanding is that there's a lot of contested information here. I believe that the men in question said they were advised to try and make a citizen's arrest. Again, it gets murky. I think it's very important people don't jump to conclusions, because a lot of the information coming out is as bad as it was in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. But a lot of these details I know to be correct. And again, I want to stress, I think it was absolutely wrong that Arbery lost his life in this case. But let's rewind real quick. You live in a small community. A guy who doesn't live there repeatedly enters a building. Trespassing. I mean, that's about it, right? Well, With that, these men decide we're going to stop him the next time we see him. They did not witness any crimes. They do not know if this is the guy in question. It's just someone they don't recognize in their neighborhood. They pursue. They go armed. Should they have been? Well, here's the challenge. They have a legal right to keep and bear arms, don't they? They do. Well, they want to stop this guy. They say they want to talk to him, maybe perform a citizen's arrest. This was a bad idea. My view of it is don't go chasing individuals. Call the police, take the videos, submit it. Let them handle this because they have certain legal protections. Well, these men tried to pursue him. Again, my understanding is that when Travis McMichael exited the vehicle, they were in front, not behind Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud Arbery goes around the vehicle to the right, but then crosses left and engages with Travis McMichael, getting into a fight with him, grabbing the weapon. The shotgun is blasted. Ahmaud Arbery takes the hit, and he dies. It sucks. Do you blame Ahmaud Arbery? A lot of conservatives have pointed this out. Yo, if three guys in trucks are driving around me, they pull up, a guy gets out with a shotgun, you think I'm going to be like, do whatever you want? No, I'll defend myself too. In that capacity, I think it's a fair argument that Ahmaud Arbery, seeing a man with a shotgun standing in front of him, decided, I got to defend myself. This is a perceived threat. It's an interesting argument. I don't know for sure. What I can say is I don't know how they get malice murder and felony murder and all of these things across the board. To say that this was the right verdict to me is actually kind of shocking. I mean, at the very least, manslaughter, which I believe in Georgia, malice murder is effectively like unintentionally killing someone. You know, the guy who was following in his car and filmed it and whose evidence actually sparked the indictment and the conviction to convict him of murder? Far be it from me to be the arbiter of morality here. Let me show you Andrew Branca's assessment here. This was yesterday before the verdict came in. Judge Walmsley drops the ball on ambiguous citizen's arrest law. Apparently, the jury is to figure out how to apply a citizen's arrest law that befuddles the lawyers and the judge. I also then want to read you some comments from those who are following the case. They say, today the jury heard the last argument and received their instructions in the Arbery case in which defendants Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael and Roddy Bryan are each facing a count of malice murder, 4 counts of felony murder, and then the 4 predicate felony counts, aggravated assault, false imprisonment. He says, the entire case essentially hinges on the question of the underlying citizen's arrest. If the effort to make a citizen's arrest of Ahmaud Arbery was lawful, then everything that follows was also likely lawful. Conversely, if the effort to make a citizen's arrest was unlawful, everything that follows was unlawful. And both sides fully understand this. In particular, ADA Linda Dunikowski is fully aware that if she loses the jury on the question of citizen's arrest, she loses the trial entirely. Naturally, then it's in her interest to have the citizen's arrest statute interpreted as narrowly as possible. And there's definitely room for interpretation in the statute that was first made law back around the Civil War and makes use of legal terms of art that likely don't mean today what they meant back in the day. Certainly nobody drafting a citizen's arrest statute today would construct it as this one is constructed. The amount of ambiguity in the statute is really remarkable, if only because of the statute's brevity. It is only 2 sentences long. Those sentences are, a private person may arrest an offender if the offense is committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. If the offense is a felony and the offender is escaping or attempting to escape, a private person may arrest him upon reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion. My own reading of that statute, applying normal rules of statutory construction, is that the 2 sentences present 2 different scenarios for citizen's arrest. The second sentence refers explicitly to a felony scenario and sets out certain requirements for that scenario that differ from the requirements set out in the first sentence. My reading is that the first sentence is therefore contemplating the alternative criminal scenario, the non-felony, the misdemeanor. So if the citizen's arrest is being made for a serious felony like murder, the person making the arrest is required to have a reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion, which Judge Walmsley is interpreting as probable cause. Fair enough. If the citizen's arrest is being made merely for a misdemeanor, however, then probable cause is not enough. After all, an arrest is a real burden on the person's personal liberty and ought not to be done lightly. Before we'll allow a citizen's arrest for a relatively minor crime, then, imagine shoplifting, for example, will require more than just probable cause. Will require that the offense was committed in the presence of the person making the arrest, or that they have immediate knowledge of the offense, perhaps observed from a distance. So my reading of the citizen's arrest statute is that the first sentence refers to arrests premised on a misdemeanor offense and the second to felony offense. ADA Dunikowski urges a different reading on the statute. She argues that the first sentence is supposed to apply to all citizens' arrest, whether for misdemeanor or felony offenses, such that any citizen's arrest requires that the offense be committed in the presence or within the immediate knowledge of the person making the arrest. The second sentence then adds additional conditions, the probable cause requirement that must be met in the case of felony arrests. The construction makes no sense to me, if only from a public policy perspective. Why? Because it makes it easier to make a citizen's arrest to constrain a person's liberty if they've merely committed a misdemeanor like shoplifting than if they've committed a heinous felony like murder. That doesn't make sense to me. In addition, if we're supposed to read in the presence immediate knowledge into the second sentence, then the probable cause language in the second sentence serves no purpose. If the offense occurred in your presence or with your immediate knowledge, you have a degree of certainty that's vastly greater than mere probable cause. You know for a certain the offense happened. Probable cause is merely a probability that it happened, less than certainty. It's like saying that before you can make any arrest, you have to be 100% certain of the offense. But before you can make a felony arrest, you also have to be 51% certain. That makes no sense. So as you might expect, I favor my reading of the Georgia statute over that of ADA Debunking. And that makes sense. Debunking is the prosecutor who wants a conviction. In any case, however, at the end of the day, the question of how this law is to be applied in this criminal trial is not up to me. And it's not up to ADA Debunking. And most definitely of all, it's absolutely not up to the jury, whose job it is to be the finder of fact. The person in charge of the law is the judge. And this Judge Walmsley abjectly failed to determine the law. And in a trial with 3 defendants looking at life in prison, that's contemptible professional failure. Remember, the key issue is whether the 2 sentences in the citizen's arrest statute are intended to be melded together so that both apply to all arrests, or whether the conditions of the first sentence refer to misdemeanor arrests and the conditions of the second refer to felony arrests. That's the fundamental issue that Judge Walmsley needed to resolve, and he did not. Now, I want to stress there are a lot of conservatives tweeting, "This was justice. Justice was served." And I'm just like, what? How? The media narrative around this was a lie the whole time, just like with Kyle Rittenhouse. When I dug through this, trying to figure out what was going on, we certainly see some culpability for the 3 men in question, less so for the guy driving and simply filming. But to act like Ahmaud Arbery was simply jogging through this neighborhood where he didn't live miles away from his own neighborhood, it's pure gullibility. Do I think this guy deserved what happened? Of course not. Did he have a right to defend himself? You damn well better believe he did. You pull up in front of me in a truck and get out with a shotgun, and then you think I'm going to stop for you? You're nuts. But in the video, you see Ahmaud Arbery go around the truck and then confront McMichael. The Wikipedia glosses over it and says they engaged in something. Yeah, McMichael isn't the one who charged at Arbery. Arbery could have turned around and gone the other way. He could have turned right. He could have turned left. He kept running towards them. It's all on video. That being said, you don't have a right, in my opinion, to just pull cars around a guy and come out with guns and be like, "We're going to stop you now." They had not seen him commit a crime other than trespassing. You want to engage someone accused of trespassing with a shotgun, don't be surprised if they fear great bodily harm and death and feel like they need to defend themselves. You're standing in front of them with a gun. But this is a tough legal question that I do not believe amounts to murder, felony murder, malice murder. I don't know that justice was served. I got to be honest, I didn't follow this closely enough because I was following the Kyle Rittenhouse case, but I certainly covered this in great detail, and I can tell you the entire narrative was that this guy was peacefully jogging down the street when he was hunted down by racists in a lynching. That was the original narrative. It was only after the fact we learned that this guy had repeatedly gone into a house that was under construction, seemingly, some people believe, to case the joint. Now, I can't tell you what his motivation was in going into that building, but I believe it's pure gullibility to think this is just an innocent jogger who decided to stop inside a random building for no reason. Trespassing numerous times? Now, I will be fair. I don't believe that it can legally qualify as trespassing unless they put up a sign saying no trespassing. So if they didn't have up a sign, because you need to give people notice, and they decided to confront him with weapons drawn, that was a big mistake. Now, a lot of people might argue that you don't know if this guy's armed, you don't know if he's a criminal or not, but if you want to make the assumption that because a guy entered a building, he's going to be armed and deadly, sorry, I think you will lose in court. That is not reasonable to me. It's a tough case. Ultimately, what ended up happening, we had a conversation a bit on this, is that the judge ruled, unless the crime was committed in their presence, guilty. What ended up happening? The jury came back and said guilty. And that's the point here brought up by Andrew Branca. He says, with all of the legal experts in the courtroom, 3 attorneys for the state and apparently 6 attorneys for the defense, plus Judge Walmsley, we are going to leave the fate of these 3 defendants to however the jury decides to interpret an ambiguous statute that appears to befuddle even the experts. It's ridiculous. It was the duty of the judge to decisively construct a non-ambiguous jury instruction from this ambiguous statute. Sure, maybe a later appellate court would decide he'd done it wrong and reverse him, but at least it'd have done it. I would also note that had Judge Walmsley done his duty and resolved the ambiguity of the statute, there's only one possibly legally sound outcome: that the 2 sentences not be conflated, but rather treated separately. Why is that? Because under the legal doctrine of lenity, when a criminal statute is ambiguous, the ambiguity is always to be resolved in favor of the defendant, never in favor of the state. It is the government that drafted the statute and passed it into law, not the defendant. And they left in ambiguity. That's on the government, not the defendant. In short, Judge Walmsley dropped the ball on this all-important citizen's arrest jury instruction. Simply makes this entire trial a little better than a train wreck. And any guilty verdict this jury delivers is inevitably tainted by the failure to provide the jury with clear and unambiguous instructions on the key legal issue in the case. The issue that determines guilt or acquittal for these 3 men on charges would put them in prison for the rest of their lives. It's contemptible. In any case, here's the entirety of the instruction. He says, remember, you carry a gun so you're hard to kill. Know the law so you're hard to convict. That is Andrew Branca's law of self-defense little motto there. I don't know. You've got a lot of people saying this. These men were simply seeking to defend their neighborhood from burglaries. There had been a string of burglaries. I believe a gun had been stolen only a month prior. This is why the men in question were concerned about whether or not they would be threatened and their lives would be in danger. To the conservatives coming out and saying that this was the correct verdict without knowing what happened in this case, I think is also contemptible. There's a lot of facts here that we need to bring back up. And if you weren't following this trial, and I wasn't, I will be the first to admit it now, 4 or 5 times. But I did follow the case. And these men, it was, I believe, in January of 2020, I believe, they had reported a gun was stolen from a truck. I think it was one of theirs, and that tools had been stolen. So, of course, they were concerned about potential violent attacks. Ahmaud Arbery, I believe they pulled in front of him. Travis McMichael gets out of his vehicle with a shotgun. Arbery runs around the right side of the vehicle and then flanks left and engages Travis. Now, I will say it again. You stand in front of me with a shotgun telling me to stop. Don't be surprised if I'm like, I have no weapon. This guy's got a gun. He's telling me to stop. I don't know what for. We don't know that Ahmaud Arbery did anything wrong. Trespassing. Was he warned not to trespass? Then probably didn't commit a crime. And you want to stand in front of me with a weapon. Don't be surprised if I'm like, I am not going to let you do that. I tell the stories about how I'm in Chicago and people come up to me and say stuff and I get into it with them, right? So I'm not surprised Ahmaud Arbery did this. That being said, getting into a fight with someone who's armed, Travis McMichael, his intention was only, as he states, concern that someone stole a weapon, trying to stop what he believes may have been a crime committed, and he may have the citizen's arrest right on his side. That wasn't resolved in this case, which means this may go to appeals. These guys may get out. I want to show you the comment section. This I find fascinating. Today, at 10 a.m., one commenter said, I expect a verdict by 8 p.m. today at the latest. I expect a not guilty verdict or a hung jury. There simply is no evidence to support any of the charges, and that is even without considering the defenses of citizen's arrest or self-defense. I just can't believe that there won't be at least one person on the jury with common sense and moral convictions. Well, you were wrong, good sir. They said the McMichaels had plenty of chances to kill him, but they didn't. He only fired the shotgun when Ahmaud attacked him. And Ahmaud gained his attack by going around to the right and taking a hard left right into the McMichaels. The facts are undisputable. So one said all involved, including the entire city of Brunswick, will face a terror campaign if insufficient guilty verdicts are delivered. This could be a political verdict. I remember when I covered this, I was attacked in the media relentlessly because they had their narrative. I remember talking to friends I no longer talk to over the Rittenhouse case. They've lost their minds. And they said, how could you claim that these men shouldn't go to prison for murder? They hunted down and lynched a jogger. And I'm like, that's just not true. The McMichaels, I believe, acted improperly. I understand what they are claiming. Maybe they're lying. But they were in front of Ahmaud Arbery. He was running towards them. Now the argument became that the neighbor was actually trying to box him in. I gotta stop for a second and just make sure I say I didn't watch the trial. So for all I know, a lot of these details were cleared up and I could be totally wrong on this. I believe that's important to point out. All in all, what I can tell you is that they're all guilty of murder, every single one of them. Maybe it is that I got it wrong, and I'm willing to accept that. But it's strange to me that the left will come out and say that Kyle Rittenhouse is proof that our system is broken. And then what? A week later, like not even a full week later, the guys involved in the Ahmaud Arbery killing are all found guilty. The narrative is bunk. The justice system has its problems. Politics plays a role. I'm not going to sit here and be like the system is corrupt and it's ruined. I actually think we have one of the greatest with all its faults. Maybe this was the right choice. We're going to have a greater discussion on this later on. A lot of the points I'm making are based on when I covered this a long time ago. And it's fair to say that the details may have come out that may, I may have gotten wrong. But I've heard from many individuals that the problem here was the citizen's arrest law. If these men had a right to confront someone they believed committed a crime and they had a right to defend themselves, I don't see how it's murder, like felony murder, malice murder. I guess what they're basically saying that in the commission of a felony, someone died, it's your fault. That's what they're getting at. Not that they went out there intending to kill. I'm not a legal expert. I'm just, my whole position on this is I'm not going to pretend to be the arbiter of morality. I don't like the media propaganda narrative. I don't like them omitting details and facts, which I can state. Like in the Wikipedia, they're like they engaged in a fight. Arbery ran around the truck he ran towards the truck, ran around it, and then engaged them. You can argue for or against it, like I just did. But to act like Travis McMichael is the one who ran up to him is not true. But Travis McMichael is the one who pulled the truck up in front of him, got out with a shotgun. I suppose you can choose to run away, turn around and go the other direction. But the neighbor was pulling up behind him in a car too. And this guy's armed and you don't know what's going to happen. I think there's a fair argument over maybe even felony murder. So I'll say this. It may be the correct verdict, but we have to be honest. And we can't just come out and say we know for sure. There's arguments to be had. If the citizen's arrest question was not instructed properly, they're probably going to appeal. And then it's going to be, this guy did commit a potential crime, a misdemeanor trespass, because he had done it several times. I don't know for sure. I don't know, man. I don't know. I just don't like everyone jumping the gun and saying they know for sure. I'll leave it there. Next segment will be tonight. We're going to go in greater detail on this stuff with Andrew Branca, who's the self-defense guy. And this should be interesting. So go to youtube.com/TimCastIRL, subscribe, and we will see you live at 8 p.m. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see y'all then.